Hey everybody, Jared here, and today I'm going to teach you how to take 3D photos with a 2D camera, specifically your cell phone. And there's a lot that we need to cover in this video, so let's get started. You don't look at the world with one eye, but your camera does. We use two eyes when we look at the world, so if we want to see real depth, we need to use a camera that also has two eyes. Since we're not going to be using a real 3D cameras, and yes, they make real 3D cameras, what we're going to do is we're going to fake it by using a 2D camera twice. When we use a still camera to take the same photo twice, well, one from the right eye and one from the left eye, we need to make sure that nothing in the scene changes based on time or space. So everything in the left image has to also be in the right image in the same position as it was in the real world. So anything that is moving in the scene is out. A car, a person, a bird, the wind, blowing things, whether it's the trees or the wires or a bag rolling down the street. Anything that is different from picture one to picture two that isn't from the camera being different, because obviously picture one, picture two, those are different. But if the scene itself changes, this won't work. So there are limitations to using 3D photos from a 2D camera, but it's a good starting point, especially when you're trying to learn about depth. So you either need to pick a scene that has no motion in it whatsoever, or you need to learn to take your pictures in a hurry. I'm very, very careful about making sure that I'm going to take my pictures in a hurry. Now watch as this truck pulls beyond me. Picture one, picture two. See, those wouldn't line up because the truck would be in two different locations in two different pictures. I'd have to wait until the truck was completely out of the scene, or I'd have to make sure the truck was completely stationary before I took a photo. When picking your composition, there actually is such thing as too much depth. We want to make sure that we pick the right stereo window. What do I mean by stereo window? Well, look at the video right now. Look at me. If you look at the picture, the closest thing to the picture would be probably my shoulder right here. And that would be the nearest point in the picture. But look everywhere in the picture. Is there anything nearer than my shoulder? Well, probably my nose. My nose is probably a little bit more forward than my shoulder. And you want to start viewing the world in layers. What's the nearest item? What's the next nearest item? So you could go the nose, the shoulder, the chest, the this, and then you can go the car, the house. So you can literally look at every single item as a distance. And that becomes very important because that includes the sky or the ground. Whatever you can see, ask yourself, how far away is that, especially in relationship to other items? When we shoot in 3D, we want to make sure that our nearest item is at least 6 feet away. Now, when again, that nearest item will include the ceiling if the ceiling is in view. So the floor, if the floor is in view. So indoor shots can work, but you want to make sure that if you're tilting downward or you're tilting upward, that you're thinking about what is it that the eye can see? What is it that the camera can see? So look at every single point in the composition and think, what is the nearest point and is that 6 feet away? Now I'm holding the camera with my arm, so obviously it's a lot closer than 6 feet away. Unless I have really long arms. No, I don't have really long arms. I'm actually pretty short. So you want to be thinking about the 6 feet away as a general starting point for this type of photography. There are ways of being able to shoot closer than 6 feet, but we have to get to that, and let's work on that after we've done the basics. So 6 feet away is the minimum. And again, look at the picture here. Look at the composition. Now, this is an exercise that we're going to start off by doing. As you get further into this, it's going to be faster and faster to shoot a photo. You're instantly going to look at it and go, oh, that's the nearest item, that's the farthest item. What is the farthest item away from us right now? You can kind of take looking in the picture, look at there. That's another issue that we'll get to later on. I know many of you are excited about 3D because you want to have things poke through the screen, but I'll be honest with you, in the real world, nothing pokes through the screen. The window that you're looking through, the camera, the screen is actually your eye. And if I were to poke through, that would be, you'd feel this. You'd feel this if I poke through. It's an effect. It's a special effect to have you poke through the screen. Now, I will tell you how this works and the one area that will work in, and that is, let's say I've got this pen here and I want to poke through the screen. Well, I can do that as long as the pen doesn't touch the edge of the screen. Everything that touches the edge of the screen must be behind the screen. That includes my arm, by the way. So if my arm, my hand, can be behind the screen, but it can't be in front of the screen, but then the pen could come closer. There we go. The pen could come closer, and the pen could poke out a little bit. It'd be better if I had like a long stick, but I don't. I've got a pen. There you go. So I want you to think very carefully about the fact that nothing's going to poke through the screen. So you're trying to find the perfect composition, and let's take me out of the equation. I'll still be in the picture, but pretend I'm not here and that everything is 6 feet away or farther. Now, take a look. Is that a good 3D photo? And you're like, ooh, yeah, a tunnel. I love a tunnel. I'd love to see a tunnel. Well, guess what? Start marking the numbers with your eyes. Make the layers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They're not there. They're not there because that tunnel doesn't give the eye things to stop at. And your eye desperately wants things to stop at. It feels like it's going to be an interesting composition, but looking straight down the road is not going to give you the real sense of layered depth that your eye is going to be looking for. Let's look at it again. Again, ignore me. So here I am looking straight down the road in that 1-point perspective. But now, if I go like this, oh my goodness, now make the layers. Car, 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 house, tree. There you go. So you want to be thinking about things that are going to break it up. If I had a row full of people standing in the road, that'd be great. But you don't want to be looking through just a pipe or a tunnel or something like that. There's just not going to be enough to really grasp onto to make a good 3D photo. I want you looking at the world as if it was layered. Go ahead, take a moment, look at the layers, count what's near, what's far. Can you, like it was cardboard cutouts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So once you've got your composition down, it's time to actually take the photo. Really easy, take the photo. Ooh, one last thing when it comes to composition. Give yourself room to breathe. And I mean that from a margin perspective, around the edges of your photograph. Take a look over here. Do you see that tree and that pole? Well, if I keep that right towards the edge of my photograph, when I take one photo and then I take the other photo, they may disappear. And an item that's in one picture, not the other, will vibrate really strangely. So you want to make sure that if you're going to do this, I would take one photo and then the other photo, and that'll help a lot, especially if it's something that's going to show up as a primary part of the subject. Now, you have plenty of megapixels on your camera to be able to zoom out, give yourself room, and be able to crop later. So remember, cropping is going to be part of this, as we'll see. Now, when you're going to take a photo, a lot of people are going to hold their camera out. They're going to do all sorts of stuff. And the idea is you want to center your body. You want to get the center of mass. I'm actually going to spread my stance a little bit. I'm going to bend my knees a little bit and give myself a nice centered weight so I'm locked into place. And when my body is locked into place, you can feel yourself. You can feel your body getting locked into place. You also want to get your phone locked in your hand as well, which means that when I'm holding the phone firmly in my hand, I want to get my arms kind of locked into place. I want to get a really good sense of, yeah, I've got a good position here. I'm holding this camera and I'm holding it firm. So you're ready to take your photo. And most people shoot their left photo and then the right photo because we read from left to right. But there's a much better way of doing this. Most people are right eye dominant. So when they're looking out in the view, their brain is actually looking through their right eye as their primary eye, and the data coming in from the left eye sort of matches into it. So when you're composing your photograph, you want to shoot your right picture first because that's the one that primarily people are going to see. So you're going to shoot your right photo and then your left photo. And you're like, wait a second, how do I control this? Well, I want you to remember that it's okay to tilt up and it's okay to tilt down, but it's never okay to tilt from side to side. You want your camera as level as possible. Now, in the old days, they would tell you to do is put all your weight on one hip and then shift your weight to the other hip. And that would work really well, but I've noticed with my students that when they shift their weight, they shift all their weight, and it comes crazy, these giant separations when it's only supposed to be 2.5 inches to 3 inches, 70 millimeters. It's just going to be a little bit. So you're going to go picture, 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 picture. It's a little bit of a motion. The best way to do this, of course, is to practice. Photo, photo. You know what? You can even take more than 2 photos. You can go photo, 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 photo. And now you have multiples to select from. Picture 1 and 2, picture 1 and 3, picture 2 and 3, picture 2 and 4. You have all sorts of possibilities that you can do by moving the camera just a little bit at a time. Remember, if you go too much, it's going to suck. It's going to be broken. If you go too little, the depth won't be as great, but the photo won't be broken. So again, it's better to do too little than too much. It's better to have multiple images so you can hedge your bets. So photo, 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 photo. Now I've got a series of photos that I can go and work with, and I'll have my other tutorial about how you post-process photos to view them in 3D. Now this is great if you remember that nothing can be closer than 6 feet. What if I want it to be closer than 6 feet? Well, then the separation has to be smaller. There's a mathematical equation, there's a general rule. It's not 100% perfect, but it's a good starting point. That the distance from the camera to the closest object, whatever that distance is, if you divide it by 30, that's how much you move the camera. It's called the 1/30 rule. There's actually more complex math for this, but it's a good place to start, that the distance that the camera moves should be 1/30th the nearest item in the composition. Simple as that. Now, if you're going to do things that are very up close, you can't have too much depth in the photo. So when I'm working with things that are like micro, when I'm working at macro level, when I'm doing something really small and I'm only moving the camera a teeny bit, I've got to make sure there's not a lot of depth in the scene, that there's actually just a background there that's going to block things off, because otherwise the background will just be a nightmare. There's one other way of looking at it, and that is, instead of shooting things that are really small, how do you shoot things that are really big? This only works if there's no foreground. How do you get no foreground? Well, if you want to shoot a cityscape, you go to the top of a building. If you're at the top of a building and you're looking outward, and I always talk about the Empire State Building where there's that fence, or the Eiffel Tower where there's that fence. If you're out there and you're looking through that fence, there's no foreground, because the ground in front of you is all gone. You don't actually see anything. There's nothing near to you except for the buildings in the distance. Now, if I were to take a photograph and then another photograph, one eye apart, it would practically look flat because there's not enough difference between the two images. So what do? You take a photograph and then you move several feet over, because believe it or not, several feet over will allow you to fuse together one good photograph. And you have to experiment. Matter of fact, when I go to the Eiffel Tower, when I go to the Empire State Building, I'll actually take regular photos through the fence. The fence is great because you can use it to line things up. Another example is people will put their camera on a tripod and they'll go to the Grand Canyon where there's no foreground if you're right at the edge of the canyon, and you'll take a photograph and then you'll move the 10 feet away even. But when the image fuses, it'll look miniature, because your brain isn't used to seeing depth. When you see buildings, when you see skyscrapers, you're actually not seeing depth. You're seeing all the other cues of depth, but you're not seeing the depth itself. So when you finally do see depth, your brain goes, those must be toys. And it's really a cool effect, but you have to make sure that there's no foreground for this to work. So it really only works at the top of buildings or the edge of ravines or things like that, where everything drops off in front of you and there is no closest point. Remember, look at the picture. Look right at the picture right now, and you can sit here and say, this hand is closer than this hand, which is closer than this head. And you can kind of look all these things around, but then go, where's that? Is that nearer or farther than 6 feet away? So all these things are things you constantly need to look at when you're building your composition. The nearest distance and how much you're moving the camera, and keep it level. Again, you can tilt down, and again in parallel, you can tilt up and then in parallel. But if you have it crooked, you'd have to go parallel this way, and then the photograph would be at an angle, because you can't adjust it that way. Remember, I can see in 3D at an angle because that's the 3D I'm looking at, but it'd have to be at an angle that would stay at an angle, and that would mess people up, and you don't want to do that. Okay, that's it. You've learned to look at the world a little differently. You've learned to look at the layers. You've learned to look for the nearest point. You've learned how to hold the camera nice and firm, get it in there, no wiggles, photo. A couple of things to remind you is that you want to make sure that your camera's focus is set the same. You want to make sure that everything on the camera is locked into place if it can be. If you're going to be quick, it probably isn't going to be a big deal. If you're going to go slow, you want to make sure that things like the lighting doesn't change and things like that. But, photo, you'll be fine. Now, I'm going to take some photos, and then we're going to go off into the software and learn how to post-process them for red cyan anaglyph glasses, or for side-by-side viewing if you have a side-by-side viewer. All right, everybody, I'm Jared. Thanks for watching this video on how to shoot 3D photos. It's a starting point. This is not meant to be definitive. This video is going to be, 10 minutes long. You're not going to learn everything there is to know about 3D photography in 10 minutes, but you are going to get started. And practice is how you get better at anything. Make sure you like and subscribe and leave comments, and check out my other social media. I've always got good things to show. Thanks for watching.